Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Police and Crime Commissioner meeting, Monday the 13th of November. We're at Staffordshire County Council in the Oak Room. This meeting is being webcast, so please be aware of all that during the course of the meeting. Hopefully you've all had a copy of the agenda. I'll move straight to the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Maycock.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? No, none shown. Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of October. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at those minutes. And we noted in the action, we'd like to put in the action log a mention of the comment regarding disability hate crime that hasn't been logged. Now we understand, Commissioner, that this is work in progress and you are across it, as they say. So we look forward to getting a report, ideally before the next meeting if possible, but for formal discussion at the next meeting. Thank you. Could I take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Krepsky, apologies if I haven't pronounced your name correctly, Councillor, who has replaced Councillor Fitzpatrick. Our colleague is from East Staffordshire, so welcome to the meeting. Nice to see you here. Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda, decisions published by the Police and Crime Commissioner. And we note that there is no decisions that have been published on the Commissioner's website since the last meeting. Item 5 on the agenda, questions to the Commissioner from members of the public. We do have a series of questions today from members of the public. Shall we call colleagues to the table?
Mrs. Mallinger isn't here at the moment, but Mr. Riley, who's the second member of the public on the agenda.
Okay. Mr. Riley, would you like to come to the table and address the meeting, please?
Good morning, everybody.
Can we just wait for your microphone to come on?
Oh, sorry. Good morning, everybody. In relation to the two questions I've answered, I've no supplementary questions.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Okay, that's all right. All right, well, thank you very much for submitting the questions. Thank you. Mr. Reid next, do you think? Yes. Mr. Reid, would you like to come to the table, Mr. Reid? Okay, thank you.
Right, well, I submitted my question after the last meeting. I've received an answer. I would say I'm a bit disappointed. I'm all in favour of the installation of ANPR cameras, monitoring the 2% of motorists on our roads who do not have tax and do not have insurance, amongst other things. And I do hope that in the future the Commissioner feels able to publicise the results on a regular basis. Let's see how many of these people are caught and are forced to pay their contribution to the roads. We've all driven here today. I know, Chairman, you've driven about 30 miles from Burton-on-Trent. You have passed numerous people on that journey today from Burton to Stafford who are not taxed and not insured. And I think the ANPR cameras will help reduce that problem and 100% support. But I just hope we're kept informed as to their success over the subsequent months.
Thank you for that. Commissioner, would you like to respond to that question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Reid. I'm glad you're a fan of automatic number plate recognition cameras, because I am as well, and that's why we've invested, or I've approved £500,000 worth of investment in them this year, which is going to make a significant difference. More cameras all over the county, particularly at key junctions, tracking vehicles in and out of the county as well, and also more mobile ANPR cameras. So this will be in Roads Policing Unit and also local police team vehicles. And it will mean every district has got equipped vehicles. Now, they, as you suggested there, they are used for identifying vehicles without insurance, without MOTs to some degree. But actually their primary use is to identify known criminals, look for vehicles that have been believed to have been stolen, and particularly to help monitor and assess situations, sometimes after a crime, to see which vehicles were in a locality, so they aid investigation as well. And I think it's they're far more a robust tool in dealing with criminals that use our road networks, which are very good, in the widest sense. And the real value is quite often you pull somebody over for something such as missing insurance, and they'll find stuff in the boot. My own deputy found, was on a she didn't on her own, but as part of a team, there were drugs in the boot, considerable value, and quite often people are going equipped to do wrong stuff, and you find the gear in the boot. So there's a much wider impact of this. The force conduct an assessment every 2 years, and we're looking to improve that. I'm quite keen, as you are, to be able to share with the public the direct relationship between that investment and results. But the results go further and wider than the two important things you've pointed out. So yeah, very happy to pick that up, and it might be something I include in my public performance meetings going forward. Thank you for the question.
Read no supplementary, I take it?
No, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
The panel has had two further questions from Mr Bradbury, who isn't at the meeting today. They were received within the required timescales, but after the agenda has been published. Unfortunately, the information isn't available to report to the panel. It will be sent to him as soon as it's available, and I'll give him the option of raising it at the next meeting if he wants to.
We won't mention that.
No, she's not here, is she?
Right. Is this the next
That's the
item?
next item.
My laptop's just thrown a wobble, as it were. Commissioner, could we talk about the MTFS budget now, please? The next item on the agenda, just while I re-sign him.
Yes, please. And sorry, morning, Chairman, morning, panel. Sorry, I haven't said hello properly before. So, a couple of medium-term financial statement updates today. This one and then the Fire and Rescue Service. It's a key point for me, 6 months into the year. I'm particularly keen at this stage to assess how good our allowances were in the previous MTFS, how accurate we've been with our forecasts and budgets, and to understand what the implications are through the year. Now, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, Chairman, is just ask my 151 officer, Catherine, just to take us through some of the highlights first, and then I'll return and pick up a few bits and take some questions, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner.
Hello Chairman and members of the panel. Today I'm just going to, well, David and I are presenting the updated MTFS reports for police and then fire. There's a number of similar assumptions around the changes to the MTFS in both reports, so we're both going to pick out the important points for you. The police report provides an update on the following, so the current year's budget position, the MTFS assumptions for the future years, key dates in the budget setting process, and it does provide an update on capital spend as well. So, starting with the outturn position at Q2 for the group, the Commissioner's Office and Staffordshire Police is forecast at 242 million at the moment. That's $500,000 underspend, which is a good position to be in. And the in-year budget position, despite the overall inflationary pressures, is continuing to show a small underspend, so that's a good position to be in, and ensures that we're in a good place for the challenges, financial challenges ahead. So since the panel met back in February, the external financial environment has continued to change, with inflation running higher than budget and the pay award coming in as higher than budget as well. And I'm just going to talk through the changes in the MTFS assumptions in a little bit more detail, and these are mainly in section 4.2 of the report in that table. So the table is shown in 24-25 next financial year, the budget gap has increased by 2.4 million, it's now at 5.8 million. And the budget gap has increased by 7 million to the 12.6 at the end of the MTFS period in 26-27. The panel should note that this increase in the gap is driven by mainly the two factors I've just spoke about, so higher inflation and the higher than budgeted pay award, which are largely out of the Commissioner's control or that of Staffordshire Police. So just going through some of the lines of the table in a bit more detail. So the assumption around inflation, we've now increased this to 3%. It was 2% in the previous reports. Also, the budgeted pay award has been increased to 3%. Previously, that was 2%, and we're assuming that government funds anything above that 3%, which is what's happened this year. There's pressure on the budget because the pay award grant doesn't cover fully this pay award, and also around the rank and supervisory mix that Staffordshire Police have got. We've also increased non-pay inflation to 3% to mirror what we've done on pay inflation. There's a couple of small new pressures there of around 600k. These are around care and custody and targeted variable payments for detectives. But these are offset by some new savings that we found around capital financing, insurance and the regional organised crime unit. So as part of the budget process, the MTFS will continue to update this through the time when we come back to panel, which is February the 5th. And the closure of the gap will need to be reviewed as part of this process to look around the use of reserves and any further savings that we can find. And the settlement from government is expected on the 19th of December, which will play a key part in this update for the next MTFS update in February.
Commissioner.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. You've heard there a reasonably good position, some good estimates and forecasts made. We're slightly underspent. I think it'd be interesting to see where we are at the end of the year. Some of the underspend is due to not being right up to our target operating model in some areas, and that's due to a really challenging recruitment position at the moment. It's been like that for about 18 months actually. The country's got such high employment at the minute that bringing in people, even to an attractive job in police or fire and rescue, is actually quite tricky and demanding. And the extra vetting delays that have occurred this year haven't helped, because if people are waiting 3 or 4 months for their job to be confirmed, it's quite tricky. Just wanted to pick up a couple of other bits that Catherine hasn't shared with you. There's a statement in 2.5 there. Important, I think, going forward. This is a bit of a platform for me and my team in terms of reviewing the budget for next year, and we'll be back and discussing that with you in detail. So we do have some constraints on where we can go for savings. I'm not uncomfortable with them. One of them is not to reduce police officer numbers, given the national support for the uplift. In fact, I'm looking to increase officer numbers. Again, similarly, local commitment around contact call handlers. So some of those are officers, most are staff. And again, we're not. Our ambition is to increase in those areas. So it means that where we go for savings is quite limited. It's about efficiencies, improved technology, and things of that nature. But it means that we're sort of looking at around 25% of the budget for savings. As Catherine said, the pay award was good. I think that was correct and about time, and mostly covered by government, but not completely. About a 5-10% shortfall in the final settlement that we receive, and that tends to be the way it works. There's a statement there about the council tax. I did set a slightly lower council tax than I could have done last time, not quite up to the preset limit. I think it's worth noting that that was, I think, other than one, the highest council tax contribution to the police service in 15 years. Now that's mostly because it was quite a chunk to ask of the public, but also because more houses in Staffordshire and a really very welcome health in terms of business and individuals' contributions in a good recovery of council tax due. And that's really helped to put us in a solid position, particularly in comparison with the majority of other police forces. The previous highest was when my predecessor asked the public to help support additional police officers ahead of the national commitment to 20,000. And in fact, I really welcomed Mr. Riley's question, because that was right to the heart of one of the misconceptions. We're very busy recruiting, but the numbers we quote are always additional officers. In this case, since 2019, 394. But that previous council tax commitment was to add more to that, and by May, I hope to have 2,000 officers, which is getting on for 500 more than a low point only 4 or 5 years ago. So it's taking us back in the right direction. Those gaps we've seen. Some statements about utilities. We'll see that in police and fire. Actually, the confidence, I think, around energy, we've just got to watch and see, because we're now in another, unfortunately, terrible international war situation, and the Middle East is clearly important in terms of energy costs and so on. We've got reserves at the moment planned for use to balance the budget this year. We do have a healthy reserve position. We also have a healthy capital position, and we're going to be using our own resources rather than reaching for more expensive borrowing, as others will have to do. So that's something that gives me some comfort, because we've got some areas for investment going forward. So all in all, Chairman, I think this represents and highlights what a good effort David and others made. John, who's the S151 officer for police, made last year in preparing the MTFS, because we're really pretty close to what was being forecast. I'm very happy to share some more as it develops over the next few months. There's a bit of uncertainty, as there always is, but I think we're in as good a place as any to still make some constructive choices for the next few years.
Thank you. We took some time to look at the document and came up with a series of questions, and I'd like to just, you may have touched on them, and we clearly note that where we are in time in terms of budget preparation and MTFS. But if I could just throw a few things on the table, please, Commissioner. Paragraph 7.7 talks about the capital programme and targeted removals. What are targeted removals? Some investment, for example, could lead to income generation. At some point, we'd like to know what you intend to remove from the capital budget. Just moving on to the next point, what criteria has been used to decide on the reductions? Is there a formal process to do that? We can't quite get a feel from the papers we've looked at as to how you've arrived at that decision. And paragraph 7.3, £1.6 million worth of loans will be paid off. And we had a thought that why pay that off when we're getting good interest rates at the moment? Maybe that's a sum of money that you could have used to support continued investment. Your view on that would be welcomed as well, please. And in terms of reserves and the assumptions around reserves, perhaps it's too soon, but what happens if you've got any of this wrong? How robust will your assumptions be? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm struggling to identify or specify the targeted removals. I don't think they're significant. Actually, my conversations have mostly been around confirming projects going forward, such as estate refurbishment, sharing of estate between police and fire, continuing investment in vehicles, and we have in the plan, but still subject to a further review, the significant firearms training resource. We've also brought in a facility for personal officer training as well, which is in response to College of Police requirements. I'm going to have a quick look at Catherine and David, who may know more about removals.
Yeah, so I've got the detail around two of the removals that are mentioned in the report at Q2. So these projects were either no longer required and they were deemed to have no business impact from their removal. So one is around 400k on IT. So there's various projects including network infrastructure, storage and hosting and data warehousing. And a second one is on estates, just over 100k. Improvements to Herne Court and works at Block 6 back at the HQ, just deemed no longer needed. So they've been removed.
Right.
Good. Well, they're not insignificant amounts of money, but I'm not surprised I haven't heard about those in detail in that case, if it's IT and HQ refurbs that were deemed unnecessary. On the loan item, so that's loan at the moment we would be paying an increased amount of interest on. So I think it is now at the point where it's actually practical and probably planned in to pay that back. Yeah, David?
So thanks, Commissioner. Just to pick that up, Chair. So yeah, in terms of that loan repayment, that will be a scheduled repayment at a particular date. So as the Commissioner says, we have no option but to repay that loan. But of course, we'll be saving the interest that we would have been paying on that loan. And I get your question around receiving high levels of interest at the moment on our investments. But of course, a lot of these loans are historic and would have been taken out at probably an average of around about 4.5% anyway. So the impact will be fairly neutral in terms of that position.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. On the reserves position, this is something that we keep a really close eye on. The service has got sensible reserve levels in line with those recommended across the service. Again, not necessarily reflected across the country, but comfortable here. And you may recall when we were setting the MTFS last year, we talked about the earmarked reserves, which are largely in place to support individual project work or anticipated areas of pressure, right down to sort of department level, IT reserves and things of that nature. We also talked about the general reserve, which is the main resource that we've got at £9.5 million. That's about 4% of the net revenue budget, which is exactly where it should be according to recommended practice. But we also had a budget support reserve, which we put in place a couple of years ago, and that was essentially to allow us to balance the MTFS without any sort of call on reserves that wasn't expected. Now, I will never be in a position to say things that might happen in the world mean that we don't need to call on reserves that we hadn't anticipated. But I'm also not comfortable having bigger reserves than would seem sensible or necessary. And in this case, I think they're exactly the right value at around that 4% mark. So we ought to be in a position to ride through any storms, but I can't guarantee that, nobody can. But we're in a very good position there with our reserve strategy.
Right, thank you for that clarity, Commissioner, and that goes a long way to, depending on what you were going to say, I was going to ask that the sort of information you shared with us today in terms of adding clarity to the statements, whether you would consider putting those sorts of things in an appendices for us to just to take it in prior to the meeting, rather than ask it here. If that would be acceptable to you, the panel would find that really helpful.
It would, Chair. I believe in our annual MTFS we definitely detail the reserves, earmark, general, etc. And we'll continue to do that, but we can bring it through in the half-year reports as well going forward.
That would be really helpful, thank you, because it helps us put the picture together rather than get it all the big bang on one day, as it were. Pardon that expression. Okay. Colleagues, are there any questions on that topic for the Commissioner? Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. You talked earlier, Commissioner, about the growth in police officer numbers. I'm not sure I heard you correctly, but you hope to achieve the target, was it next year? So it's a growing recruitment. Have I got that right, first of all? Yeah. So as we recruit officers, the year they're recruited, they're not at full cost because they're only here for part of the year. So my question is, the budget, does that reflect that the growth in wages is incremental, or does it assume that we're fully staffed all through the year?
Yeah, the budget does the best job it can in anticipating that. We've had a couple of factors this year, actually. One is the opportunity to get support from government for further uplifted officers. And I believe it's in the region of about 60 officers that we've been able to take over and above our original uplift allowance. Now that means that we've taken some of those in or sought to recruit them a little earlier than we might have been planning to. And I think our numbers are around about, they're only a handful, half a dozen short of the 2,000 I was hoping we'd have by May, which is good news, but it does mean it's brought it forward, but that is with supported contribution from government. The other thing that's mentioned in there is that through the year, we've sought to bring in some experienced officers. So where there have been opportunities for transferees, this is officers who wanted to come to Staffordshire, particularly as detectives where there's a pressure on our investigations, we've brought some people in. Now they are generally of a higher grade with more experience and a little more expensive than in the budget, but that's all been managed in year. And one of the things I'm really keen to do, Chair, when we come back to talk about next year's MTFS, is to very clearly set out what we've got planned last year and how we've got on with that, what we've done in year in terms of pressures but also investments that we've dealt with through the period, and then what we've got planned going forward. And so we'll reaffirm where those extra costs have fallen in terms of experienced officers.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, I did ask if you could share with us any details regarding the criteria that you and your team have used to decide on the possible reductions in the budget and the MTFS. Are you able to give us an overview on that?
Yes, of course. And actually, part of that process of reviewing the year, I would absolutely expect to have a narrative along each area of pressure or gain. I think you'll be as interested in where we've had underspends and savings, as well as where we've spent some money and made investments that we felt were timely as well.
Okay. Right. What's the next item on the agenda? I can't get it up.
If everybody's finished.
Yeah. Are there any further questions for the Commissioner on this item? No?
MTFS for fire.
Yeah, I think we move into the MTFS for the fire. There's a lot of commonality in the questions that we shared with you today, Commissioner. So perhaps you can either confirm the applicability to the fire service or add any other specific points that we may have perhaps find interesting.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, yes, absolutely. The Fire and Rescue Service is looking to keep us safe in the same environment as police, but there are some nuances and differences. Again, with your permission, could I just ask David if he wants to give us a brief overview, and I'll pick up on one or two bits after that, if I may.
Yes, please. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair. And first, I'd just really like to thank Catherine for the update that she's provided for police, and for members of the panel, really. The paper that you'll see in front of you for fire hopefully follows a similar sort of format and takes you through the story and the same sections that you've seen for policing. So I'll try not to avoid any duplication, but I'll cover off some of the key points if that's okay. So just starting off with the outturn position for fire. So in terms of the latest spend position and the forecast for the year, again, we've got a positive position for fire, that overall the spend forecast for the year at £46.5 million is in line with the budget that was set. In terms of spend to date, there are some savings that we've seen at the moment from pay and also from better income. We've talked about investment income that is slightly better, and also we are, because of those slightly better areas of income, we are results in a lower use of reserves required by the end of the year. And this is also despite the fact that we have seen an increase in business rates costs for fire. So the latest valuation office agency business rates forecast came in this year, and we've seen an increase across the fire premises that at the moment we are managing to absorb. Like policing, we are continuing to monitor the impact of inflation on our cost base, and we'll continue to do so, particularly through the winter period when we start to look at and review the impact of, for example, the cost of electricity and gas as we go through the colder period of the year. But at the moment, we're predicting that overall those costs will be in line, or if indeed slightly favourable to budget, particularly around some of the utility areas. Now, members of the panel will remember when we set the budget for fire this year that there was the last minute issue around pay awards for 22-3 of 7%. There's also a 5% pay award for the current year 2023 for all operational fire staff. And also as well, this paper considers the impact of further pay awards for next year, which are again likely to be above the budgeted levels that we incorporated within the MTFS. So as Catherine's done with the police paper, we've incorporated a table within paragraph 4.4 on page 7 of the report that just looks at the opportunities and savings and some of the risks that are coming through that we're experiencing at the moment. Now, of course, the external financial environment continues to be uncertain, and inflation, whilst it is reducing, it's still running at a high level, and many of our cost increases are factored upon RPI and CPI at specific points in the year. So we're still reflecting and trying to understand the full impact of that as we move through this year and into next year. We've also assessed that overall net position for opportunities and savings and risks, and that's resulted in a small increase as we move forward to 26-27. So we started off with an MTFS gap of around about £1.3 million, and we're currently reflecting that that's probably going to increase slightly to £1.5 million. And we'll look at the table in a little bit more detail in a moment, but primarily that is associated with the impact of additional costs coming through for pay. So hopefully members of the panel, you've had opportunity to look at that table in section 4.4. And I talked about pay, but under the new risks, you can see actually the impact of predicting an increase in pay from 3% to 5% as a £500,000 negative impact on our MTFS as we move forward. So that's on top of the business rates additional cost that we're seeing of just under £400,000. And also we are reviewing the impact of employer contributions into the firefighter pension schemes, which are also going to increase this year. Now, we understand that part of that cost, or majority of that cost, will be funded by government, but we're waiting for full clarification of that. So we have got new risks identified within the MTFS of around about £1 million. Now, in terms of the opportunities and savings that are offsetting that, we are seeing, as I mentioned, a smaller increase in the utility costs as we move forward than we anticipated, as well as the contract for the insurance for the fire and rescue service is under review, and the Commissioner has now approved a new approach, so we are going to deliver some savings on insurance as we move forward into the MTFS period. We're also going to receive an additional amount of revenue support grant from the government, because that's going to be based upon the CPI as at September, which was at 6.7%. So we've got the benefit coming through of that. And on top of that as well, we've also got some shorter term benefits of additional interest that we're receiving from the cash that we hold. Now, in terms of the budget process, so Catherine's already taken you through the budget process for police. Fire's pretty much the same, so in terms of similar timescales, but of course we will come back to the panel on the 12th of February with the budget report for next year. Now, of course, the closure of the estimated gap in funding will, of course, need to be reviewed as part of the budget process exercise, and we will continue to reflect upon the impact of the transformation programme and the savings that are being delivered at the moment, and also, of course, how we're going to support that budget position with the use of reserves for next year. Now, panel, I mentioned that we are in a position where we'll use slightly less reserves next year, during the current year, but that, of course, then allows us potentially to use that budget support reserve as we move forward to the budget setting process for next year. As part of the ongoing transformation work for the Fire and Rescue Service, we have a dashboard tracker that basically tracks all the savings that we've delivered to date, and the Commissioner gets to see that tracker report on a fairly regular basis as part of our governance board meetings. But of course, we are in a position where we do need to address that gap as we move forward. And as I said, we have that gap of 1.5 million as we move forward into the MTFS period by 26-27. So there will be further work that's required, for example, on career models and transformation, in order that the service has a flexible workforce available at all times. As Catherine mentioned, the settlement from government is expected on the 19th of December, but of course we know that the settlement will come through generally probably Christmas Eve, or certainly that week before the Christmas break. Within the paper as well, in addition, the service has identified a number of investment areas for the Commissioner to consider during the budget setting process. The National Fire Chiefs Council are currently trying to, I use my words carefully, positively influence the Home Office and Treasury to see if there's a referendum limit of £5 going to be afforded again for next year. Now that would deliver an additional amount of income for the Commissioner to consider as part of that investment as we move forward. But of course, the Commissioner will be consulting on the proposed level of precept shortly for both policing and the Fire and Rescue Service. So, Chairman, I'll leave it there, but obviously happy to take any questions about the overall position for the Fire and Rescue Service. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, David. Yeah, I think actually the summary you've got of the timetable on page 3 is quite handy. It does remind us of us getting together on the 12th of February. There's some similarities there to the police situation. I think pay has had a bigger impact in fire and rescue, and is probably the issue that is causing most uncertainty going forward. But again, we're in a pretty good shape here. We've got good estates, good reserves. My ambition is to get the Fire and Rescue Service in a position where it is really in the very best position to keep us safe 5-10 years into the future. And I'm pleased to be in that position because that's not the case everywhere. However, genuine challenges in getting to that situation, not least our recruitment of on-call firefighters, which is so important given our mixed urban and rural geography. Some positivity there with recent recruitment and a substantial number of proposals being made and worked through at the moment, which I am sure will mean more people want to join as on-call firefighters, and certainly those who've joined want to stay. A good list of where we're looking to invest, mixture of training, technology, improved response in terms of taking advantage of drones, and also really considering new risks such as lithium-ion batteries. You'll have read, I'm afraid, about incidents related to those. I'd just say to the public, be really careful if you're buying something that needs recharging. Get something that's absolutely clearly, properly marked, follow the instructions. Too many fires in garages, sheds, things like that, when people have plugged devices in and they catch fire. And Chair, just to refer to the reserves position, very similar on police. I've got the same approach here, 4% in general reserve. There are earmarked reserves already in place for future anticipated spend. And again, we're very happy to detail those, and we'll do so at the 6-month phase. And David mentioned that you'll see some similarities in how this is presented. Actually, I'm really keen that we get them even more similar, not least, you're probably like me. If you get to look at something in a consistent format, it's helpful. So I'm going to try even harder to get the two documents set out in the same sort of way. Thank you.
Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly there's a backlog in terms of investment in both the fleet and in ICT. And what impact is that having on the ability to attract more firefighters, whether it be on call or retained? Because it seems to me that if you don't have the investment in the fleet, you don't have the investment in new IT, then clearly there are questions there about the improved safety for fire officers, and particularly when you're talking about reducing manning on particular vehicles. So what is the plan to deal with that backlog in investment? Because clearly if people have the option to go to a different fire service where the investment is perhaps greater, then they may well do that. So what is the plan going forward to try to address those issues, and what is the impact on both the recruitment and retention of existing staff?
Commissioner.
Thanks, Councillor Atkins. I don't think I used the word backlog. I'm conscious that there's areas for future investment. I know this year we've invested in our breathing apparatus. We're about to land some new heavy equipment, area ladder platforms. David, is that?
Yeah, Commissioner.
Right?
So, thank you for the question. Yeah, so Commissioner, absolutely right. So we've recently taken delivery of 2 new aerial ladder platforms. So these are very expensive items of equipment. We've also got 2 new heavy rescue tenders that are due for delivery at the early part of sort of the spring next year, and then we're looking to procure a further 3 appliances as well on the contract that we've got. So we are. I would hope there is no backlog significantly within our core fleet. In fact, we are investing in quite considerable amounts in our heavy fleet at the moment. So I'll be disappointed if that was having a detrimental impact upon our recruitment.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. if I may, Chair, I've not really, in my station visits, I've not picked up the word backlog or detriment. Generally, firefighters and staff are in really good premises compared with the rest of the country. The only one I think is overdue an upgrade is Stafford, actually. And that's because we were considering some other options there for further investment. We're cracking on with that now. And my ambition, as I said, 5-10 years in the future, we are going to have to replace some of the pumps, particularly reserve equipment, rather than the stuff they use now as their primary resource. But when that's being serviced and repaired, they go to reserves. So a continual refresh of the equipment. It's also working practices and tech. And there's something I think is worth mentioning there. We'll probably pick it up again later in the fire service review, is what they call the clean cab concept. So because of correct concern about contaminants being brought back into cabs from fires, how do we make sure our firefighters have got clean working environments when they're in the vehicles, that their all their appliances, kit, clothing, etc. is safe because of any risk of contaminants that cause long-term illness. So we're right ahead of the game with this stuff. For me, it is about investing in a service that we can all feel comfortable with. It is not trying to cover debts, trying to chase pay increases, although that is a genuine challenge. And as far as I'm concerned, my ambition is to keep the locations open, keep them absolutely properly equipped, and make sure we've got a flexible firefighting resource to respond to the incidents as quickly as possible.
Chair, under technology and systems, it states, a number of ICT systems and associated processes are outdated, and the approach to improvement due to reduced resources over the last few years has meant that progress has been slow. In order to exploit the benefits of new systems, the service needs to accelerate these projects, and which will require investment. So clearly, ICT is not just something we would like. It is actually very much about the safety of firefighters, because if you can't communicate properly with your firefighters on the way to an incident, which may change over time, then it seems to me that this is something that should be a priority, because clearly safety is a priority, or should be a priority for the service. And if we're in a situation where ICT is outdated, then clearly we're not providing the firefighters with all the weapons they need to deal with whatever incident they may come across. And of course, you know, it is a complex environment out there, and they need to have the technology to deal with that. Now that's what your report says. And then it also says under response, in order to provide the most up-to-date resources to deal with the changing risks within the county, it is imperative that the service explores new and improved technology. So there is an issue there. I mean, you don't call it a backlog, I called it a backlog, but what is happening with that? It's in your report. Let's have some explanation.
If I may, yes, apologies. The ICT systems, actually this is something that has been brought to my attention in the last 3 or 4 months, really. The key concern is around more the administration, back office type IT, particularly with improving our reporting. And that's because of not so much pressure, but encouragement I'm giving that everybody has got access to performance data quite quickly. And we want to jump into using Power BI and things like that to automate reporting for our analysis. However, it also includes a significant investment that is down the line for fire control. Now, this is a service that we share with West Midlands Fire and Rescue. They've recently gone through an upgrade. It only finished about 6 months ago, actually, and we're being told there's another one to come. And it's quite a significant jump to the very latest version of fire control. that is really state-of-the-art, wonderful stuff as it is. And in fact, Chair, the panel might want to visit the Shared Control Centre at West Midlands Fire one day and just to see the level of technology and communication that's already in place. But there are some added advantages that ourselves and West Mids think we'd want to take advantage of. And actually, Councillor Atkins, what you're doing here is setting out for me the conversation I want to have with the public this side of Christmas about, yes, we have a fire service that is well equipped. We have a fire service where firefighters' safety comes first and can get out to incidents really quickly. But I want to put it in a position to deal with the issues for the next 5 or 10 years. So I will be talking to them about their appetite for investment, and it will be into some of these areas. In terms of heavy kit, I'm quite sure we're ahead of the game, and I'm now looking at what do we do with our reserve kit. Now that's the sort of conversation that most of the fire and rescue services in the country would be delighted to be having. Just in terms of that ask, it does state in the document that the council tax precept I set this year was not quite as high as it may have been. You'll remember the conversation. That was when inflation and particularly energy prices were hitting everybody particularly hard. But it was the biggest council tax contribution to the fire and rescue service in 15 years. And to my, actually the records don't go back far enough, but I think it's possibly one of the biggest ever. I believe the public are seeing the difference that we're making in both fire and rescue and police. They have absolute confidence in their 2 chief officers, which they should do, who are now fully settled in. And I think we're in a position to ask them if they could invest with us to secure their future. So it's a welcome conversation, but I absolutely don't want to leave the impression that this service is not safe and properly equipped, because it is.
I would just add that the job of this panel is in fact to raise issues that the public want to raise. So that's exactly what we're doing at this panel, to ensure that we're flagging up the issues which our constituents are raising with us.
Yes, I would support that comment, Commissioner. It's vitally important. I know you do listen, and there's no doubt about that, but the point made there I think is very important, and I do hope that you've taken that on board. Just the earlier comments we made about service transformation, that'll start to unpack as we move forward, I think. But what I did noted was obviously flexible responses with an increased productivity of 3% being a target. What would increased productivity look like from the fire service?
Well, one of the ways, one of the differences might be something we've referred to before. We've talked here about a trial that we're currently running for on-call firefighters to attend some incidents as a team of 3, where they can't attend as a team of 4 or 5. And to give you an example, the latest on the trial is that I believe we're up to about over 250 incidents have been attended. They would not have been attended by that on-call team if they were previously running to the rules of not going on the run with less than 4. And those are incidents where we might be preventing people going back into burning buildings, preventing people going into water after their dogs. There was a terrific example in Nosal where one of those smaller teams got to an incident within minutes, was able to put out a fire, I think related to a tractor. That pretty much saved the lives of 30 or 40 cattle in an adjoining barn. So these are incidents that simply would not have been attended before. And productivity is fundamentally improved by that type of activity. So we're continuing with the trial, looking forward to seeing that progress further. It's actively supported by the firefighters and themselves, but we'll be continuing to consult with them and the wider public as we review the progress of that. So it's that sort of fundamental. And another fundamental is keeping retained firefighters engaged. We are considering different training, different rules around the amount of distance they might live from a station to accommodate the fact that the world has changed. And that's all about increased availability and increased productivity. Tomorrow, Chair, I'll be hosting in this room, actually, the Chief Fire Officer for one of our 6 monthly public performance meetings. We will talk about that. We will be talking about ICT now, I've been prompted, and I'll see if I can get a bit more detail tomorrow that you can pick up on. And as always, Chair, yourself, panel members are very welcome to sit in or to observe that online and just see the performance of the service and where we're going and hear it from our Chief Fire Officer.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Just two final points, if I may, and we'll commend the fire service for the work they've done recently when we had the incredible amount of rainfall, which must have stretched them on the day, as it were, or a few days. And it's admirable to their capabilities that they managed to deal with all saving people and animals and pets, all very important to the community. And the point we touched on earlier about lithium batteries, from a community point of view as well, I was minded to ask about your communication strategy or someone's communication strategy to get the message home to the public of the importance of looking after these lithium batteries and the vehicles that they're in. The scooters, you can you can see so many scooters now bombing around the street, and what happens to them when they get home? They're in the lounge, they're in the hallway somewhere. Now that is beginning to look like a source of fire for people, and of course the disaster of it all could be the loss of life. So is there anything you would consider doing in terms to drumbeat that message home to the public?
Just on both of those points, Chair, I mean, firstly, all that work done by the fire service during the flooding, it's worth reminding ourselves that that's not statutory duty at the moment. It is still something the Fire and Rescue Service take on in their rescue capacity, but also beyond their sort of defined duties. I would really welcome a more formal statutory commitment that fire and rescue support flooding. Climate change is not just about increased heat and fires in open grasslands and so on. It's also about flooding. I mean, it's certainly about flooding around here, and they do a fantastic job. If it was statutory, I think there would be opportunities for increased investment in more kit, and actually there'd be a real pressure applied from the service to prevent areas that regularly flood and things like that. So I think it's in everybody's interests that that happens. With lithium-ion batteries, we do some communications. I think coming up to Christmas, it's a real opportunity to step that up. It isn't just the heavier stuff like e-bikes. If it's a scooter, there might be an issue because generally, unless you're riding that on private land, it's illegal and you shouldn't have one. We can have one, but you can't ride it. And they are dangerous, and quite often, because they're not legal, they aren't coming in through approved routes, and the technology is not up to scratch and at higher risk of catching fire. And that's worth parents looking out for and others, because it's not in anybody's interest to have dangerous kit being imported. But e-bikes, but even charging things like power tools, phones, etc. Do it properly. Make sure you've got proper charger cables, and don't leave stuff charging any longer than it needs to be, because unfortunately there's risks related to it. I don't want to frighten people. This isn't a massive issue, but it could be if we don't address it. It's part of looking after your own household.
That's fine. Thank you, Commissioner. Right, I think at this point, are there any more questions for the Commissioner on the fire service? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, you partly answered what I was going to ask about the trial that started with reducing the number down to 3. It talks in the report on page 30 that it's currently being evaluated. There's a number of focus group meetings taking place during November. When, as a panel, can we expect to see an actual evaluation report? How will it come back to us? And in terms of the budget setting process for next year, how has it been factored in so far? Because it's started the budget planning process. Has it factored into what you've done so far? Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Well, the the trial's been running for some time. It's going to conclude 1st of December after 6 months. So it's been running for quite a while. Chair, could you remind me, have you already requested that I bring back the details of that after the trial period? Yes, good. If not, I'm really happy to do that because I think it would be useful. And the Chief Fire Officer will be giving an update tomorrow, as I said. I would urge, if I may, I've had a few councils and other bodies asking me questions about this trial. I won't say they've been misinformed, but they certainly haven't been fully informed. And a lot of them don't seem to realise that the route to ask questions like this is through yourselves, through their elected panel member. Whilst I'll always correspond with town councils, etc., it's your duty to hold me to account on this type of stuff. And I'm absolutely willing to do it around issues where there might be safety concerns. I gave a few examples earlier of the type of advantages. I think they're considerable. I think it's an absolute lifesaver for people if we get this right. But it will also mean a better experience, more experience for on-call firefighters. And hopefully that's a reason for them to stay with us. We gave an award to someone in Loggerheads the other day, Chair, 40 years of service as an on-call firefighter. Jumping up from the table every other Christmas and so on to attend an incident. It was quite remarkable. But people's personal circumstances have changed, and if we can encourage them to stay for 10, 15 years rather than 4 or 5, that would be great. In terms of working this into the budget, actually the budget implication is only that we would get nearer to our target for the number of retained on-call firefighters that we want. There isn't, on that basis, it would probably cost the service more because that's an area where there are generally an underspend at the minute. But the real advantage that's being worked up, and I'm hoping to work in, is around the productivity improvements I mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions for the Commissioner? Okay, could we move to item 8 then, the Fire and Rescue Annual Assurance Statement, please? This is a comprehensive document.
Chair, it is, isn't it? I wish I'd had this document when I was considering the role and when I first landed, because I think this is a really good read. If anybody hasn't, well, I'm not suggesting it, well, let's just say if you've got an interest, this is a really good way to get a total overview of what our fire and rescue service are doing. I particularly welcome, and it's quite important that we've done this, we've taken a decision to move the review of our formal safety plan and push it on till the end of the summer. So we've extended it by a year. It's been refreshed, and this is part of that refresh and also part of the process of informing the public what fire and rescue do. And the reason for that is because I'm a fire commissioner rather than an authority, the election timetable can have an impact in terms of my fire and rescue plan. In other words, what the public have asked me to ask of our service above and beyond or in line with their statutory duties. So I'm really pleased to see that the fire and rescue plan is referenced throughout the document, as I would expect it would be going forward, whoever was commissioner. But also I think it makes for a good read. It demonstrates where we're making investments. It's open and honest about the challenges that we face. And I think people will find it quite handy. It talks about the public performance meetings. It talks about the extra sharing of estates that we've got planned in for police and fire. There's half a dozen locations there, which I do hope will work out. They're still subject to some final checks and so on. And indeed, it talks about the 3-rider trial in an informative way as well. So I hope you and your panel members found it helpful, because I did, and I think anybody who reads it will.
A question that occurred to me, and I think colleagues as well, this is, we wonder whether the public had any input into this document. This is all, obviously it's all about the fire service, what we're going to do for you. Is this what the public want? It's an easy assumption to say, of course it is. We don't want to die in a fire, or we don't want to get washed away in a flood. But what, has there been any public input?
I think this document is a statement of assurance rather than you're going to test me now, the CRMP. What's that stand for, David? The risk management plan is a formal statutory document which does require wider public consultation, and that is a process that's being kicked off right now to conclude later in next year, as I've just said. So that's the one where there's a wider input. But of course, my plan has been informed by public input, and that's largely why you'll see reference in here to things like climate change, flooding, as we talked about earlier, but also the future of fire and rescue, which I see as fundamentally supporting and working alongside our other emergency services. So the falls response work is mentioned there. I was pleased only last week to hear that the fire service, I'm in danger of doing some spoilers here ahead of tomorrow, but I think we're going to be doing some commissioned work with the NHS to assist with winter pressures. The service will be helping with some returns to home from, that's been approved, David? Great news. So that's more work where the fire and rescue are saying, look, we can do this and we can do it well. It's great value for the public. Let's help out with getting people back from hospital safely into their houses. But again, I'll go through that in some detail with Rob Barber tomorrow. So yes, it's fully informed, and there's opportunities at the back there. They're saying, please do tell us what you think of our safety plan. Please do contribute to the consultation at staffordshirefire.gov.uk. And I'm really keen that the public say how they'd like to see their fire and rescue service not only do the great job they do, but do a bit more as well.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask about the falls response team. Is this because it can be taking up to 5, 6, 7 hours for an ambulance service to respond to a fall? I've had a couple of incidents, I know, in my hometown of Leek, where there's, in fact, it both happened within 2 weeks of each other. 2 ladies fell, and on each occasion they were told, the people assisting the person, a couple of retired nurses on one occasion, were said, you know, would you take responsibility for this person? Well, no, of course not, because they haven't got professional liability. And the second one was when someone had fallen and it was going to be at least 5 hours for someone to attend. Now, what concerns me is that on both occasions it happens, there was a retired nurse on hand, and she was aware of the problems of moving those people. One, in fact, ended up having a broken hip, and the other one, I think, had a broken ankle. But in both situations, she was able, because she has medical training, to assess the situation. But when you have, and we're talking here about vulnerable people in the community, maybe living alone in isolated areas, what assurance can we give the public that very well-meaning and competent fire officers won't actually move someone in a situation where that could lead to further damage to the individual concerned. Because, you know, if you're lying on the floor in pain, you wouldn't necessarily know whether that was down to bruising or whether that was down to a fracture, or indeed, you know, there could well be a back fracture, which would of course be devastating if someone was moved. Now, so how is that working? Because it seems to me that if this is a sort of sticking plaster to plaster over the massive gap in the ambulance service, it worries me that shouldn't we be perhaps investing in the ambulance service to get it right, rather than expecting the fire service to paper over the cracks?
Commissioner. Thank you. I'm very familiar actually with one case in Leek where a gentleman spent nearly 8 hours on his front doorstep, and it was life-threatening, the fact that he did. He could have been supported, and that's partly where the conversations between the services arose from. The service is commissioned by the Integrated Care Partnership, so NHS professionals, they are commissioning on the basis that those providing the service are fully capable of doing so. In the case of the team that do the falls prevention, they're fully trained. They're not fully trained to make an assessment. That is done by the control centres. It's done by the ambulance service and others. But they're in contact with those control centres, with paramedics, with doctors, and they are trained to identify issues and make the relevant phone call. Now, occasionally, they actually pause and they'll wait for the appropriate follow-up. But in the vast majority of cases, their intervention is actually saving lives, preventing people going into hospital. I think it's absolutely right that the people providing the service are fully insured and trained and backed up, not only to for their own reassurance, but to know that they are not likely to cause further concern. My own view, Councillor Atkins, is that the ambulance service should be there sooner. I don't know why it isn't. And if they are reaching for help, then I'm delighted that we've got professionals who can help them. Firefighters aren't involved in this particular service. If they were, actually, they're within a whisker of paramedic type support anyway. And you'll be aware that firefighters are often first at the scene, and other fire staff for road traffic collisions, where equally you can face situations where, in fact, probably more likely going to face situations where people have got a real risk if they're not, if they're moved incorrectly and not managed. So there's a great wealth of experience in the organisation that supports it. I don't believe at the moment there's been an incident in, it's almost a year in, I think, that programme. I don't think there's been an incident where a poor, an assessment has been badly made and the service have been at an incident they really shouldn't have been at. They are graded and triaged effectively. And just to build on that, I'm looking forward. I'm taking the Chief Fire Officer and Assistant Chief Constable to meet with not the Chief of West Midlands Ambulance, but his care lead, because we're going to talk about these programmes. We're going to talk a little bit about right care, right person, which we've spoken about here before, and the opportunities for fire and rescue to be more involved in first responding as well. Because I'm a little disappointed that they haven't called on the services to do more, particularly in the moorlands as it happens, around first response, where we've got teams who are ready to go, fully trained, can be looking after people in minutes rather than hours.
Can I just clarify what training the falls response team has, which allows them to make a proper assessment of someone that they find perhaps on the floor. Because very often, you know, people, you know, well-meaning neighbours, for instance, are sometimes rightly reluctant to move someone because they are worried about the implications of that move. So what training do they have? I mean, I appreciate that they can ring somebody, but it still is not quite the same as being able to assess someone on the ground. And I also am very aware that the longer that someone spends on the ground, the more likely they are to suffer long-term health consequences. So I'm very, very aware of that. And therefore it is important to get them off the floor. But what I'm just wanting to know is what training are they getting to ensure that they are able to carry out that really important role safely?
Chairman, with your permission, could I bring back some detail on that and perhaps share it between meetings? The training satisfies the NHS Commissioner, so I'm sure it'll satisfy the panel.
Okay, is that okay?
We're not the NHS Commissioner, and I tell you, we're not satisfied with the ambulance service, as Councillor Cox and I will discuss this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll welcome any additional information, Commissioner. The sooner the better, really. Okay. Is there anything else on this item? Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. This document refers to independent scrutiny, and I wonder if I could take this opportunity to raise the issue of audit, not just for fire, but for police as well, please. And in the little table here, it refers to two groups, the external audit team and the ETAP panel, Ethics, Transparency and Audit. Now, I'm aware that both those groups will, as they carry out their work, will produce written independent reports on the state of the finances, and the ultimate responsibility to act on those reports rests with the chiefs of both services, because those reports will, I guess, contain some compliments, some observations, and dare I say at times criticisms. I know from past experience that always aren't taken as seriously as they might. So it's a question you may not be able to want to answer now, Commissioner, but I'm looking forward to when those reports are issued. Are you satisfied that the two chiefs involved make sure they're followed through accordingly? Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thanks, Chair. I think the audit is really valuable. My team see them all. I see nearly all of them. ETAP, that's the Ethics and Transparency Audit team that operate for me independently of police and fire, will see them. I meet with ETAP every quarter myself to understand what's on their mind. I think that's a different approach from before. And actually, my Chief Executive, Louise, and I spend quite a lot of time chasing audits sometimes because we want the information. Audits are financial, but they're also around effectiveness as well. And there have been some really very helpful ones in recent years. They are paid attention to right across the piece as far as I am concerned. If there's any reason for concern, I'd be quite interested to hear that. My view is they do a great job and it's really important. We've had some frustrating times, David, haven't we, with our final accounts audits. There's a national pool of auditors that you call upon. You can end up with a smashing relationship for 5 years, or you can end up with one that's not quite what you hoped for. In our case, we've had some late audits which have not been helpful, but our accounts aren't really needing, haven't actually, let's just say the audit hasn't come up with anything we didn't already know about. But in other places, I'd be concerned that late accounts actually mean poor accountability. So I'm very keen, actually, that audits do a good job, and I'm very interested in what they say.
Thank you for that. There's a slight difference, isn't there, between being satisfied that those groups are doing a good job, but then there's the next step, what's done as a result of that work, and if they come up with recommendations, then where's the evidence that they're actually taken forward?
Excuse me, absolutely key. And yeah, that's where conversations that we have with the chief officers at our various governance meetings really matter. One in particular I'm thinking about is an audit around the way that we handle property. So that might be evidence, other elements of property. Really growing area for the police, because there's lots more digital kit being kept now, and it has to be kept sometimes for years. So there's a whole programme of work around that, and it's been informed by an audit in the last year or so.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for the Commissioner? Yes, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether it's a question or a comment, but this is an extremely interesting read, and I'm very grateful for it to come to the panel. There is a lot of information there that obviously, takes digesting and wanting to know what we can get out from it. That you asked for people to obviously make comment on it. It's in terms of the summary and everything. What I picked up, and I again, you might not have the answer to this because I presume it may link into operational. The graph that you said in the 1 year 22 to 23, page 58. I was interested in seeing the figures where we say up. If I looked at road traffic collisions, up 14%. Now, I'm aware through the Lichfield district that we're getting quite a number of these, certainly. And in terms of reporting back, is there a view from the fire and rescue in terms of the collisions, or is that just left with the police to investigate?
No, it's for both. I paid a visit to Docksea the other day, just the other side of Stafford. There's a new base for the motorway policing group alongside the highways team, and our serious collision investigation unit are based there now. When you see the wall with the names on it of people that have died or been seriously injured, and there's over 30 this year, it's going to stay on my plan as long as I've got the opportunity. Road safety, in its widest sense, is absolutely crucial, and the Fire and Rescue Service are in the conversation all the time, not only as a responder, but they also inform our Safer Roads Partnership work, and they're engaged in all the communication engagement we do around road safety. They also assist with things like training of motorcyclists, other activities around the county, and unfortunately, I think there's been several motorcycle deaths or motorcyclist deaths this year. So that's something that continues to be a priority for me and for them. It's really important.
Thank you. The other one that drew my attention was the significant increase in small outdoor fires. I was just wondering, because I do have a worry about these portable barbecues, which I assume is what is contributing to this figure. I mean, what efforts are there in terms of how do you make it safe for people to and realise the responsibility that individuals have when having such portables? You know, I've been to Australia, for example, and they're very, very keen on obviously their outdoor barbecue areas, but you can clearly see that they are safe. And is that something that not necessarily have the heart, but look at ways that we can do more to emphasise that importance of responsibility if that is the increase that's occurring. And mindful, obviously, of Staffordshire. Staffordshire has its areas of absolute natural beauty. You know, we've got the roaches, we've got the cannet chase, and we can. The list is endless in many ways for Staffordshire, and it's a massive concern for me that we have irresponsibility. That then the pressure, that added pressure, is on our fire service and rescue.
I'm going to ask the Chief just for a bit more explanation on that tomorrow. I know some of it's due to barbecues and some of it's rural. But some of it's things like bin fires and various other incidents as well. That's quite a big increase, isn't it? Yeah. I think what was helpful, certainly this summer, was the reaction of the previous summer to retailers pulling those small barbecues. A lot of them stopped selling them when it was particularly hot the year before. And I think that's a sensible step. But this will also relate to some of the stuff I mentioned before around charging of electrical items and other bits, because of, I believe this includes things, fires in sheds and stuff like that, where that often happens. So if, with your permission, Councillor Cox, I'll ask the Chief about that tomorrow. We'll get that in the public domain a little more widely.
I would welcome that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to listen into, but I would very much welcome, because it seems a large number there, and that's, you know, I mean, obviously the percentage gains, 38% up. If you have a look at the figure below, it's 4 accidental house fire deaths. Well, that's a 33% increase. But in terms of 4 to 2,000, you know, it's we don't want to necessarily get hung up on percentages, but certainly do increase on actual numbers.
It's interesting because some of these incidents, these smaller fires, they're exactly the type of incident that our trial with threes is helping with, because it gives an opportunity for a team that's more local to be at that incident, tackle it and deal with it quite often before the full team follows up. It also means those full teams are then hopefully not even required at some of those activities. And of course they do go to road traffic collisions in 3 where they can help as well, even if it's just preparing the area, clearing the ground, finding hydrants, setting up safe perimeters, issues of that sort as well. The more we can get a team of qualified people on those locations sooner, the better. And you can see there is some pressure there in some increasing demand. The good news is we're seeing some reductions as well, particularly around deliberate fires and other items. But managing this pressure is really key.
Yeah, I'm grateful to Councillor Cox for that. It builds on the point that Councillor Atkins made about questions on behalf of the community and our concern for the community. So we can put those in parallel and frame them to you. They need to be addressed. Could I just put a question to you now in terms of the recent publicity around big dogs? I don't want to pick a particular dog out there, but how would you deal with any reports of some of the incidents that we've received notification of in the press recently?
Well, the service are, I guess you could say they've got a very heightened awareness of this. There's been a review to look at previous reports. I understand there's been some revisiting of some reports. This is not there's not a very high volume of these, but I think the public is rightly concerned because of the risks involved. And I'll meet people every day who say, look, it's not the dog hasn't been looked after. And I think they're right. It is very much correct ownership and an understanding by the owner of some dogs that if they are not looking after that dog properly, it poses a risk. I've got to say, Chair, The incident in Stonell this year was probably the most upsetting that I've had in my 2.5 years as Commissioner, when a gentleman was killed by those two dogs. And I applaud the Prime Minister for acting so quickly. They need to be controlled. There are options in the meantime for the existing dogs. The key for me here is that if people are concerned, nobody should not go about their business for fear of a poorly behaved dog. Report it. Report it. The police will take action. They will interview, they will give advice, and they will act if they need to. It's very important. And even if we as adults feel a bit nervous, just consider what that would mean if it was a child or somebody vulnerable. My own view is, if you're concerned about a dog, regardless, report it.
Thank you. Right, well, before we perhaps close the meeting, I'd just like to summarise a couple of points back to you, Commissioner, just to make sure that we are reading from the same page, if we may. The panel recognised in the MTFS context the alignment between the police and the fire service, and agree with you, Commissioner, that the objective of consistency can only add value at the end of the day. So we'll look forward to seeing how that develops over the future, perhaps, year. We would be very appreciative of appendices for any of the prices that, or costs that have been quoted in the document, with some sort of breakdown to help us more easily understand how it's been arrived at, and perhaps with an indication of the criteria, if that is relevant. We really look forward to seeing how the fire service transformation plans unpack over the next few years, or perhaps sooner than that. We haven't really got a timeline for any of the events, but we do look forward to seeing how efficient, if they can build on their efficiency. And having said that, we're very mindful of the unplanned work that they find themselves exposed to in terms of flooding, whether you agree with the principles behind climate change. There's no doubt about it. We've seen clear examples of the impact of flooding, both on the community and the fire service in recent weeks. So that's very, very important to us as well, Commissioner. Right. At that point, I think we may have concluded. Adrian?
So we've got item 9, questions?
Yes? I was just going to say item 9, questions.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were back.
Yep.
I do apologise.
I thought I'd had the last question.
No, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm sorry. Commissioner, a topic I've raised before about misbehaviour in the police, and this issue relates to the fire service as well, unfortunately. There's a lot in the media still about this, and it's not just sensational reporting. Unfortunately, it looks like there's a real serious problem around the country on misbehaviour by officers, etc. I've raised this before, and in the minutes at the last meeting, you told us that the Chief Constable had confirmed his commitment to ensure high standards of behaviour, etc. So my question is, Commissioner, as you hold the two chiefs to account, apart from verbal assurances, have they given you any formal evidence that they're actually taking this as seriously as we would want? If there is such evidence, would you be willing to share that with us, please? Or if not, is that something you could obtain for us as a report to clearly show that they are taking positive steps around this? Thank you.
Chairman, this is something I will cover tomorrow with the Chief Fire Officer, and I also cover in my public performance with police. I'm now reporting the number of complaints, misconduct cases, things of that nature, the nature of them. The Chief Executive and I, we have a regular item on our 2x2 briefings where we want to know about new cases. In fact, tomorrow, might be today, today or tomorrow, I'm speaking to His Majesty's inspectors because they have asked Staffordshire to be a pilot in a thematic review. This is fire and rescue around culture and the process around misconduct, whistleblowing, things of that nature. Now that's in response to HMI requests to focus on it exactly for the reasons you've outlined. There have been some disturbing reports from some fire brigade areas, and it's really important that any misconduct within the service, but also how the service treats the public and responds to it, is really key. I've got a full-time officer who works for me, not a police officer, but one of my team looking at police complaints. If there are complaints against either chief officer, my team handle those. And I also handle all appeals. So if a complaint goes through the process with either service, somebody isn't happy with the outcome, and there is a review of that, my team hears it. I'm content, I'm very close to this. I'm absolutely with both chief officers around their total commitment to high standards and a recognition that no one in a service can make life difficult for any other member of that service or the public. It's fair and proportionate. The way misconduct is handled through the court or with our locally qualified chairs is fair and appropriate, but I think the public are right to demand that the standards are higher than they might expect of other services, or themselves actually. So there will be some data. I'll continue to share it in the public performance pack. If you would like, as part of an annual report or something of that nature, Chair, we can do that under a specific heading of misconduct and complaints if you'd like, because we can compile that and let you know the nature of the incident. We do already do that. We do already do that.
Yeah, I think it comes in June, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Adrian?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Apart from analysis of complaints, etc., it's about a programme to change culture, isn't it? You know, which is not an overnight task. I do appreciate that. So again, without prolonging this, it's evidence that that programme is underway, as opposed to just looking at the number of complaints, if you see what I mean. Thank you.
Indeed, and I think what might be helpful at the end of this thematic review, we can feed back the detail that we've provided there, and perhaps HMI's thoughts, if they're in the public domain, we could share back through the panel as well. There's a whole load of work going on with networks, groups, representative organisations, our own policies around recruitment, positive action on recruitment to help underrepresented groups have an opportunity to get the jobs that come up, to support them through that process. I'm very comfortable with the direction of travel here. I'm particularly comfortable that people who don't realise what they've taken on when they join Staffordshire Police or Staffordshire Fire and Rescue don't stick about.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I think we have two more questions. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a question in terms of directing an interim Lichfield district. You'll be aware, Chairman, that we've now just lost another Lichfield commander, which is about the fourth within 2 years. What are your views of that initial type of churn? Because certainly we are not happy. I used a phrase of disappointment, but it goes beyond disappointing. What are your views with regards to this churn? We appreciate one cannot stop people wanting to progress within the force. but at the same time, we have to create a confidence level and stability level within our area. And I think, unfortunately, that is missing at the present moment. We've got a very, and I really commend her, we've got a superb inspector who's currently temporary, again, for the second time, has been the chief inspector and commander. But I just wish that we could get that stability in Lichfield, that, and I don't know what the other authorities are having, but I think it is, certainly within 2 years, and 2 in the matter of months, is unsatisfactory, and it is concerning. What are your views?
Could I just echo that in East Staffordshire, Commissioner? We've had 2 in the last month.
Councillor Cox, I'm really pleased to hear you say how excellent your inspector is that's stepping into the space, because she really is. Actually, and the chief inspector who's there for a period, who joined us from West Midlands. And I think not only no, I won't speak for the chief constable, but I think it was really helpful for him to have that type of experience alongside the rest of his portfolio. And this is really quite key for me. This is something I had a higher level of concern about when I joined or took this job than I do now. We need a senior leadership team in police that are as experienced as possible across all aspects of policing. Now, a fundamental part of that is understanding what it means to do neighbourhood policing, run a local policing team, and manage all those issues. Some of those individuals, though, are extremely talented in other areas as well, and it would be wrong for the service to say, no, you must stay there for 3 years, 4 years, or whatever, if an opportunity arose which they were particularly suited for, or indeed filled in another part of their wider experience. Because a good number of those chief inspectors will go on to be chief superintendents, assistant chief constables. Maybe they'll be running a force one day. So this is not for me as commissioner to influence. I do have a conversation with Chief Constable. He does recognise the value in that continued representation. And I think the comfort I take is generally there is a team in place that understands the locality. Now, you and the chairman, you will have seen your deputy commander step up, carrying that experience, whether it's Inspector Gidman in East Staffordshire, who's fully familiar with Uttoxeter and Burton, or Inspector Green in Lichfield. They are not inexperienced in the area. So my view is, if they could stick around a little bit longer, that would be great, but it's not by design. It's not by design. Unfortunately, we lost someone who headed that team up to illness. Things happen. The demands on the service are considerable. Chief Inspector Morgan is now assisting in the contact centre, where he's got a particular, sounding like that Liam Neeson character, he's got a particular set of skills around that area of work, and that's key, isn't it, for all of us? So bear with the judgment of the senior team there. What you have got from me is a continued commitment to those local policing teams, and they will be led by chief inspectors. That is something that's important to me, and I hope that we can continue to maintain that model. But I'm pleased to see that you're more than comfortable with who's in the chair.
If I may just come back on that, Chair. Yes, I mean, obviously we are, and comfortable with our temporary Chief Inspector and Commander. I'm hoping that, that her application is seriously supported, because I believe actually within her that we have that continuity. But it is a concern that we have, different ideas from different chief inspectors and as a commander in how to implement the chief constable's plan. And if we're not careful, is that Lichfield and maybe other areas as well is just not getting that message then through to make sure our communities are benefiting from the model that the chief constable has put forward. So it is ensuring that continuity. I certainly share the view that we can't stop progress, but we just desire stability.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you. I just wanted to know how the police are responding to the increased tensions and, in some circumstances, crimes against both the Jewish and Muslim communities arising out of the war in Israel and Gaza.
Thanks, Councillor Atkins. There is a heightened awareness. It's something we've discussed regionally and locally. It's something actually we've discussed in terms of the information, the briefings we get around counter-terrorism and other areas too, which I'm party to. The service here did support the activity in London this weekend, but they were also very visible out and about in our own neighbourhoods supporting remembrance services as well, which is terrific. So far, I'm not aware of any particular incident in Staffordshire, but there is a heightened awareness, and it's important, I think, to remember our Chief Constable is the national lead for the police chiefs on protest, so he's more informed than any really on the issues. There were a couple of issues related to factory units, one in Lichfield, one in Tamworth, which have been the subject of protests and people getting on the buildings and so on before, and there's been some increase in activity there. So this is something policing across the country is keeping a very close eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to emphasise the fact that it's not just the Jewish community, but obviously Muslim communities as well have a knock-on effect. And I'm pleased, obviously, that our police force was able to help in the London situation. Hopefully, now that we have a new Home Secretary, things will change a little bit.
Commander?
Yes.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Thank you. I'm not sure if that's a promotion or a... It sounds good, though.
Well, you said you'd joined.
Yeah. Chairman, I agree with Councillor Atkins. In fact, it was the... we did see, didn't we, right-wing motivated activity in London, and policemen being injured, or police officers, not just men, but women as well down there, and volunteers from around the country to support that. We will support that activity, but of course it does mean that local forces are not quite at full strength. We have to call on volunteers for those types of mutual aid situations. I'd prefer it wasn't happening. I just hope people make their case, make their views heard, without needing to inflame others and without any injury coming to anyone, least of all the police.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this point then, item 10 on the agenda, date of next meeting is February the 5th, 2024. Please get a note in your diaries about that. And at this point, I'll close the meeting. Thank you, Commissioner, and your team. It's been a useful meeting. I'm pleased we have some follow-up actions to look forward to seeing the outcome of. So the meeting is now closed at 11:49. Thank you.